She fired me at gunpoint, not because I was disloyal, not because I failed her, but because I was too close to uncovering the man sleeping in her father's chair. Lisa Blackidge, the heiress of a billion-dollar empire, diamond-voiced and steel-hearted, stood in the middle of the executive suite, stilettos slicing into marble, pointing her late father's antique revolver straight at my chest. "You're dismissed, John." That was all. No explanation, no hesitation. Her voice didn't tremble, but her eyes, they didn't match her words. They looked like betrayal carved in ice. Behind her stood Charles, smirking, polished, smug. Her advisor, her protector. The very man I had warned her about. The man I'd traced through hidden company transfers, burner accounts, and falsified contracts. I had the files. I had the proof. I was ready to confront her, but I wasn't fast enough. He got to her first. Security escorted me out with bruised arms and silence. No press statement, no justification. The guards wouldn't meet my eyes. I'd bled for this company, taken beatings, pulled her from a burning car during a failed merger protest, stood outside her door through all 4 seasons without missing a single shift. But none of that mattered now, because trust, real trust, drowns the moment power whispers in the wrong ear. And Lisa? She'd stopped listening to mine the moment Charles slipped into her world, into her bed, into her mind. That night, I stood in the rain outside Blackidge Tower, watching the lights flicker across the 77th floor, her office. Our office, where I'd once brought her midnight tea when her migraines got too bad. Now someone else would be standing beside her desk, someone whispering lies, rewriting loyalty as manipulation, and calling it strategy. I looked down at the small silver drive in my hand. The one with her father's sealed will, the one she never knew existed, the one that named me not just protector, but successor. I didn't want her empire. I wanted the truth. But if she wanted war, then I'd give her a legacy, starting with taking back everything that was already mine. My name is John Whitlock, 33, former U.S. Special Forces, discharged after a roadside blast, took half the platoon, and left me with a limp and a permanent itch in my spine. I don't do small talk. I don't do office politics. But I know how to keep someone alive when the air gets thin and the knives come out. For the last 5 years, I was Lisa Blackidge's shadow. Lisa, the only daughter of William Blackidge, founder of the Blackidge Group, a corporate dynasty worth $12 billion and still counting. When William died of a sudden aneurysm, she inherited the empire overnight. Some whispered she wasn't ready. Others said she was always meant for the throne. She didn't care about either. She just walked into the boardroom the next morning, in a black pantsuit and heels sharp enough to cut marble, sat at the head of the table, and told 50 old men to fall in line, or fall out. I respected her from the first moment I saw her, not because she was kind, she wasn't, not because she was warm, she'd never pretended to be, but because even in grief, even with her father still warm in the ground, she didn't blink when the world tried to strip her down to a figurehead. She ruled. Alone. She didn't ask for my protection. Her father did years before his death. He'd seen something coming. Something he never said aloud, but hinted at in the late-night meetings when I stood at the edge of the study while he nursed scotch and watched his daughter work from the glass-walled office down the hall. "She'll outlive every vulture in that company," he once said. "But it's not the enemies outside I'm worried about. It's the ones who'll smile while they're putting the knife in." So, I became her shadow. Quiet, unseen, but always there. At first, Lisa hated it. She hated the way I stood in the hallway during her board meetings. She hated that I read every staff report, cross-checked every visitor list, had her driver's route mapped out 3 hours before she left the building. She called me paranoid, cold. "You're not my father," she once snapped during a party when I intercepted a tray of drinks I hadn't seen poured. "I know," I told her. "Your father trusted me. You just tolerate me." She didn't reply. But the next morning, there were 3 new locks on her penthouse door. All the codes were given to me. That's how we worked. Fire and silence, steel and shadow. She never called me John, only Whitlock. Only in clipped commands. Whitlock, get the car. Whitlock, cancel my dinner. Whitlock, sit down. But over time, things changed. I started noticing the details. The way she always wore black when the market dipped, how she kept a single photo of her father in her planner, or how she never finished her coffee unless it was exactly 2 sugars and 1 cream. Small things. Things most people missed because they were too busy fearing her. Lisa didn't open up, not even in pieces. But she didn't need to. You could read her silence like scripture if you stood close enough. And I stood very close. There were moments, rare ones, when she let the mask crack. One evening 2 years ago, after a hostile takeover attempt left. Her in a spiral of lawsuits and press scandals, she'd come into the security room alone, barefoot, mascara smudged like bruises. Do you ever regret it? She asked, watching the monitors with me. Regret what? Living like this. Always. Preparing for something awful. I watched her reflection in the screen. Only when I fail, I answered. She stared at me for a long time after that, said nothing, then quietly left. But that was the first time she ever looked at me like I wasn't just part of the wallpaper. After that night, she stopped telling me to leave during meetings. She let me stand closer. She let me walk her to the car, to her home, sometimes even inside. We weren't friends. We weren't lovers. We were something more dangerous. We were loyal to each other. But loyalty is the most fragile thing in a world built on power. And somewhere along the way, something changed. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't loud. But I noticed the signs. Lisa stopped sharing the deeper files. Her meetings with Charles, the company's legal advisor, became more frequent and private. She stopped using the security protocols her father and I had built. She started canceling her own drivers, ignoring my messages. And most of all, she started looking at me like I was expendable. Charles, he was everything I wasn't. Smooth, smiling, suited. He'd wormed his way into the company through PR, then climbed through legal, whispering reforms and offering reassurances. The board liked him. Investors trusted him. Lisa relied on him. He gave her what I couldn't, ease. I gave her protection. He gave her permission to stop needing it. So when she fired me, she didn't even use my name. Just said, "You're dismissed, Whitlock," as if I were some minor inconvenience to be cleaned out with the morning trash. And I stood there nodding once, saying nothing, because if there's one thing she never learned from her father, it's this. Some shadows don't disappear when you turn off the lights. Some you should never turn your back on, and I was done being the man in the corner. Now, I would be the one standing behind the glass, not as her protector, as her replacement. The first sign of betrayal came wrapped in velvet. A private gala invitation, Blackidge's annual investor summit, delivered by Lisa's assistant not to me, but to Charles. Traditionally, I attended every year as head of security. This time, there was no mention of me, no guest list, no route map, no briefing, just silence. I brushed it off as an oversight, until 2 nights later, I saw the security footage. Charles wasn't just attending, he was hosting. Lisa stood beside him on stage, hand on his arm, smiling in a way I'd never seen before, careless, loose, unguarded. Her father used to say she only smiled like that when she was sure no one was watching. Except the cameras were watching. I was watching. The clip was short but damning. A single sentence from Lisa that cleaved me down the middle. This company is safe in Charles's hands. She never said my name. Not once. I remember sitting in the control room, fingers clenched around the edge of the desk. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was confused, disoriented. Lisa trusted very few people, and Charles had never been one of them, not until recently. I started looking deeper, past the surface, past the boardroom smiles. The first irregularity was a shell account, one that funneled bonuses to Charles's consulting firm. Bonuses Lisa had supposedly denied herself when we cut executive salaries during a rough fiscal quarter. Then came the private jet logs. Charles flying out to Switzerland. Cayman, Luxembourg, no record in the official itinerary, no security details assigned. Unauthorized yet somehow approved. Then the offshore transfers began showing up. They were laundering Blackidge's assets. Slowly. Deliberately. And all of it was happening right under her name. At first, I thought she was being manipulated. Played a pawn. I prepared a full report, documents, data, surveillance, ready to confront her. Ready to prove I still had her back. I never got the chance. She summoned me the next morning to the 77th floor. Her office, same black suit, same cold eyes, same desk where I'd once brought her tea and talked her through crisis plans. Charles was there too. Lisa didn't sit. She didn't ask. She just looked at me like I was a faulty machine. "You've been digging into classified financial records," she said flatly, "accessing accounts you were not cleared to review." "They were flagged for fraud," I answered, voice steady. "Under your name." Charles tilted his head, calm as poison. "It's a serious offense, Whitlock. Especially if you're implying the CEO is involved in illegal activity." I looked at Lisa, hoping for a flicker of recognition. A hint that she still knew who I was, what I stood for. But she didn't blink. She didn't breathe. I trusted. "You," she said. "But this crosses the line." "You don't trust me," I corrected. "You trust him." Her jaw tightened. That was the moment I saw it. The truth. She wasn't being manipulated. She had chosen this. Whether out of fear or ambition, or the simple seduction of Charles's promises, she had known, and she'd done it anyway. Lisa dismissed me that day with the same clinical precision she used to fire a barista who got her coffee order wrong. Security was called. I didn't resist. There was nothing left to say. But she underestimated one thing, her father's contingency. 2 years before his death, William Blackidge had handed me a sealed envelope, instructing me to open it only if Lisa ever strayed too far from his vision. I opened it that night. Inside were documents, legal and binding, naming me as interim successor in the event of executive malpractice or board dissolution. Hidden away in Blackidge's deepest corporate vault, the papers gave me temporary authority to act in the company's defense, should it ever be compromised from within. Lisa never knew it existed. Her father didn't trust easily, even when it came to blood. I contacted Margaret the next day. She was the only board member who had always watched in silence, never siding with either faction, never joining Charles's inner circle. But she had known William. And she believed in the original vision of Blackidge, one built on innovation, not deception. When I handed her the envelope, she didn't even blink. "I always knew it would come to this," she said, scanning the documents. "He never trusted Charles, neither did I." She placed the folder in her bag. "Tomorrow morning, emergency board vote. I'll handle the legal grounds. You bring the evidence." The next morning, before the board assembled, I watched Lisa arrive at headquarters. She was dressed to kill. Navy blue silk, hair pinned up, diamond earrings, cold elegance in motion. She didn't look at me as she passed, didn't acknowledge me. She had no idea that by the end of the day, I wouldn't just be standing in the hallway, I'd be standing in her place, and everything she thought was hers would be handed back to the man she threw away like a forgotten shield. I didn't sleep the night before the vote. Not from fear. Fear. I had lived with before in war zones, in burning vehicles, in hospital corridors with the smell of blood under my nails. This was something worse. It was betrayal. Not the kind that explodes. The kind that creeps in slow, like frostbite. You don't notice what's dying until you can't feel it anymore. I stood in my apartment, lights off, watching the city flicker through the window. In the distance, the Blackidge Tower glowed like a lighthouse. My post for 5 years, my cage, my altar. I had given that woman everything. Not because she asked, but because she deserved it. Or I thought she did. I remembered moments no one else saw. Like the time she cried alone in the elevator after winning her first legal battle. or when she whispered goodnight to her father's portrait after board meetings, the way she always touched her locket when she was nervous, or how her hands trembled slightly before every public speech. I protected those secrets like they were sacred. And now she'd chosen a man who forged documents and whispered poison into her ear as easily as saying, "Good morning." Charles didn't take her from me. She handed herself to him. That was what tore me apart. Because deep down, I'd convinced myself that I wasn't just her guard. I was something else. Something closer. Something no contract could define. But the truth hit like a cold fist. I had never been more than a convenience. A tool. A sword to wield when danger crept close, and to discard once the threat was replaced by a smoother, silkier hand. I could still hear her voice, icy and final. "You've crossed the line," I'd wanted to scream. To drag her to the boardroom and show her the files, the evidence, the shell accounts, the betrayal she refused to see. I wanted her to look me in the eyes and realize she was wrong, but she never looked back. So now, I had to make peace with a different kind of war. A quiet war. I poured myself a glass of water, staring at the resignation letter she made me sign. Unsigned, technically illegal, invalid, but symbolic all the same. I had stood outside her office for years, guarding her from harm, and now I was walking into it, head on, to save the very company she had abandoned for lust and control. What did that say about me? That I was noble? Or just a fool who didn't know when to let go? Even Margaret asked me last night, "Are you doing this to save Blackidge? Or to save her?" I hadn't answered, because I didn't know. Maybe it was both. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had the truth. And no one, no CEO, no lawyer, no smiling snake in a tailored suit, was going to bury it again. Pulled the drive from my coat pocket. The files glowed under the lamplight. Her father's will, the original signatures, the timeline of asset laundering. Charles's offshore accounts, the security footage, my report. It was all there. Proof that I wasn't the villain she painted me as. Proof that I hadn't betrayed her, but that she had betrayed everything her father built, and still. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with grief. Because even if I won this war, I wouldn't get her back. Even if the board fired her, even if Charles was arrested, even if every shred of corruption was purged from Blackidge's veins, there would be no Lisa waiting for me on the other side. The Lisa I'd believed in was already gone, replaced by someone who saw me as a threat, a shadow, a memory she wanted erased. That realization sank deep into my chest and stayed there, heavy and unmoving. I thought about walking away, letting the company burn, letting her learn the hard way, taking the offer from Mars Tech and vanishing into a new role with no ghosts. But then I remembered the security team I'd trained, the junior analysts who looked up to me, the developers who pulled all-nighters, the engineers who sacrificed birthdays for deadlines, the custodians who knew me by name. Blackidge wasn't about Lisa. It wasn't even about William. It was about the people who still believed in the mission, in the legacy, in something better. And that meant I couldn't walk away, even if my chest felt hollow, even if my name had been dragged through backroom whispers, even if the woman I once thought I would have died for had chosen someone else to live beside. I took one last look at the tower across the city, then I grabbed my coat, slipped the drive into the inner pocket, and walked out the door. The elevator hummed. The street smelled like rain. My reflection in the glass doors didn't look like a bodyguard anymore. It looked like a man with nothing left to lose, and sometimes that's exactly who you need in your corner when the empire starts to rot. The boardroom was silent, not tense, not explosive, just breathless. I'd just finished presenting every document, names, figures, signatures, timestamps, like a surgeon laying out tools before the operation. There was no emotion in my voice, no theatrics, just truth. Lisa sat at the head of the table, her hands folded, jaw tight, eyes locked on mine. Across from her, Margaret calmly placed the original succession clause signed by William Blackidge at the center of the table. "This document," she said, Grants temporary executive control to Mr. John Whitlock under very specific conditions, all of which I believe we've now met, the board members whispered among themselves. Some nodded. One took off his glasses and exhaled as if he'd been holding the truth in for years. Charles looked like he was about to speak, but Lisa raised her hand. Enough, she said, and for the first time in weeks I heard the old weight in her voice, the kind that could command a room with a whisper. She turned to me. You really did all this behind my back. I did everything your father trained me to do, I answered, quietly. I protected Blackridge, even when you stopped. A flicker of pain crossed her eyes, but only for a second. Then came the twist. I knew about the account, she said. The one in Switzerland. I approved the fund movement. The room froze. Margaret blinked. Excuse me? Lisa's voice was ice. Charles proposed a strategy to reorganize our offshore holdings. The movement was strategic, temporary, meant to avoid an SEC audit tied to the Avion merger. Bullshit, I said before I could stop myself. That account was tied to 2 shell companies that Charles personally founded. The money never looped back. Lisa's gaze hardened. And how exactly did you get access to that information? You're not head of finance. I didn't need to be, I replied, because your father gave me the keys to everything. A few board members shifted in their seats. The room began to fracture, the air suddenly jagged. Lisa leaned forward. You think you've caught me in some grand betrayal, but what if I told you I knew what Charles was doing and let him continue? I stared at her. She didn't flinch. I let it happen, she said again, because we needed someone to fall. And there it was. The second twist. She hadn't just picked Charles over me, she had used him, and by doing so, she'd gambled the company's future on the hope that she could control him longer than he could ruin her. You let him bury Blackridge in false accounts? I asked, barely believing her. For what? Leverage? No, she said. For blood. The room fell into stunned silence. Lisa looked straight into me. You know what it's like, don't you? To stand on a battlefield and realize you don't have enough ammunition. Charles was my enemy, but he was also my weapon. I saw it then. Not guilt, not fear, but exhaustion. She hadn't fallen for Charles. She'd sacrificed herself to keep him close, and she never told me. She didn't trust me with the plan because I wasn't part of it. You used me as the scapegoat, I said, my voice hollow. Letting me dig into it all, knowing you'd planned to control it. You let me think you'd betrayed me. Lisa didn't deny it. Charles finally stood, red-faced. This is insane. You can't twist this around. But before he could finish, 2 security officers walked into the room. Margaret stood. Mr. Charles, you're under internal investigation for financial misconduct and corporate fraud. The SEC has been alerted. He turned to Lisa in panic. You said you'd protect me. Her face didn't move. I said you'd be useful. You've stopped being useful. As the guards escorted him out, he kept shouting her name. Lisa didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. When the doors closed, the board fell into silence again. But this time, it was a silence built on something worse than tension. It was built on disbelief. Not at Charles. Not at the fraud, but at her. And suddenly, all eyes turned to me. Because no matter how twisted her plan had been, it was me who brought it to light. And now, it would be me they looked to fix the mess she willingly created. The storm hit just after midnight, not outside but inside the building, inside Blackridge itself. The board had barely left the conference room when the news broke. Screens across the city lit up like wildfire. Financial media, corporate watchdogs, anonymous leaks. Breaking. Internal scandal shakes Blackridge Group. Offshore embezzlement, unauthorized fund routing, and executive silence under investigation. The damage wasn't silent anymore. It screamed. Loud, relentless, undeniable. And at the center of the chaos stood Lisa Blackridge. I watched it unfold from her father's old office, my office now. The board had moved fast. Margaret made sure of it. The clause had activated, the vote was unanimous, and effective immediately, I was acting CEO. Interim, temporary, technical. Whatever the title, the seat was mine. But it didn't feel like a victory, because 20 minutes after the vote, Lisa hadn't left the building. She hadn't spoken to anyone, hadn't reacted. She'd simply walked to her old office, closed the door, and stayed there. Now, I stood in the doorway. The lights were off. Only the skyline lit the room, painting her figure in fractured gold through the blinds. She sat on the couch where she once slept through board deadlines. In her hands was a glass of something dark and unrecognizable. "You're here to fire me officially?" she asked, not looking up. "No," I said. She raised the glass to her lips. "Then you're wasting your time." I walked in and shut the door behind me. Silence settled between us like fog. "I read the report," she finally said. "The one you filed 2 years ago about Charles. You were right. Every line." "I didn't need to be right," I said. "I needed to be heard." She looked up at me then, eyes dim, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I did hear you. That's why I kept you close for so long. That's not what keeping someone close looks like." "No," she admitted. "It's not." The room felt colder than it was. "I trusted him with the company," she continued. "But I trusted you with me. And that was the mistake." I stiffened. "You think trusting me was a mistake?" "No," she whispered. "Believing I could separate the two. That I could keep the company and keep you. That I could lie to one and still hold on to the other." She stood slowly, walking to the window. Her voice cracked. "My father told me once, your legacy won't be built by the ones who love you. It'll be built by the ones who fear you. And you believe that?" "I had to," she said. "Because if I didn't, I wouldn't have made it past the first board vote after his death." I stepped forward. "You didn't need fear. You had respect." She turned to me, and for the first time in years, she looked like someone's daughter. Not a CEO, not an heiress, just a woman who'd been at war too long. "But I didn't have you," she said. "Not really. I never trusted that I deserved that." I didn't respond. I couldn't. She took a deep breath. "Do you want to know the real reason I fired you?" "No," I said. "But tell me anyway." "Because Charles told me you were planning to use my father's clause, that you'd been collecting signatures, gaining allies, preparing for a takeover. And for a moment," she paused, voice trembling. "For a moment, I believed him. I felt something fracture in my chest. You thought I wanted your empire. I thought you wanted to save me from it," she said. "And I didn't know how to let you." I turned away. "You let me think I was the enemy," I said. "You let me believe I failed you." She stepped closer. "I thought if I let you go, I could hate you. And if I hated you, it wouldn't hurt so much when you disappeared." Her voice lowered. "But you didn't disappear. You rose. The air between us pulsed like a wound." "And now?" I asked. "Now I don't have anything left to hide behind." For a moment we stood like statues. Years of tension, silence, betrayal, between us like fire. Then she walked to the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I found this in my father's private vault," she said, handing it to me. "Dated the day before his death." I opened it. Inside was a single sentence in his handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I was right. And you know who should lead." There was no name. But we both knew who he meant. "I fought it," she said. Every instinct in me wanted to deny it, to claim it was manipulation. But it wasn't. I folded the paper and looked at her. "Why now?" "Because you earned this," she said. "Because he was right. I should have felt vindicated. I didn't. I felt hollow." "Lisa," I said, "you still have the power to fix this. Stand beside me, clean this up, rebuild the trust. Her Eyes glistened. I don't think I can, she said. Not with the name I've ruined. Then take another. She looked at me, confused. Not Blackidge, I said. Not Whitlock, just Lisa. And then, for the first time in 5 years, she cried. Not a tear, not a blink. She broke. Years of grief, pressure, pride, and guilt poured out like a dam giving way. And I let her. No judgment, no anger, just presence. We stood there for minutes, maybe hours. The skyline didn't matter. The board didn't matter. For once, it wasn't about power. It was about us. Two broken people, finally stripped of everything but the truth. She looked at me one last time, eyes soft, voice barely audible. If I asked you to stay, you don't have to, I said. And in that silence, I realized the real victory wasn't the title or the seat. It was that I could finally walk toward the future without a shadow behind me. And maybe, just maybe, Lisa could too. It took 3 days for the dust to begin settling. In that time, Blackidge's reputation bled across every major outlet. Stocks fluctuated, investors panicked, anonymous staff leaked private calls. And yet, somewhere within the chaos, something began to solidify: truth. The press conferences were brutal. Cameras flashed. Like gunfire, each question designed to pierce. Why didn't the CEO report the fraud earlier? Did Lisa Blackidge knowingly conceal financial crimes? Is the new CEO just a bodyguard with a vendetta? I didn't flinch. I answered every question with facts, not emotion. We do not conceal corruption. We confront it. That's what leadership means. And over time, the noise softened, because facts don't lie, and neither did the evidence. Charles was arrested on the 4th morning, caught attempting to board a private flight using a fake identity. His face hit every news banner. Advisor turned traitor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. And Lisa? She disappeared from the tower the same day, quietly. No announcement, no scandal, just gone. I didn't see her again until a week later, standing outside the building just past midnight, staring up at the Blackidge logo as if it were something ancient, something already buried. She looked different, not fragile, not angry, just still. You should hate me, she said. I did, I answered. Then I stopped. She nodded slowly. You were never the shadow. I was. I was hiding behind the company, behind my father's legacy, behind control. You made mistakes, I said. So did I. She turned to face me. I want to return everything I inherited. Shareholding, voting rights, control, all of it. Clean slate. I don't deserve to rebuild what I destroyed. I studied her. Keeping it isn't the mistake, I said. Running from it is. She stared at me for a long time. Then I'll earn it back, she said. Not through power, through purpose. She left without asking for anything more. That was her apology. 2 months later, Blackidge was reborn. I restructured the executive team, promoted talent from within, brought in external auditors, renamed entire divisions. We didn't hide the scandal. We printed it in the annual report, because recovery isn't silence. It's confession. Margaret became chairwoman. The public loved her clarity. I took full-time CEO. The staff called it poetic justice. I called it responsibility. Lisa, true to her word, didn't return to the top floors. But she did something none of us expected. She applied, not as a shareholder, as an entry-level strategist in the R&D department under a fake name. Of course, HR flagged her instantly. I approved her anyway, not to humiliate her, but to let her find what she never had, humility through effort, and she did. No one in her department knew who she was. She worked double shifts, took the bus, brewed coffee for interns. Every idea she pitched came with hard data and zero entitlement. And slowly, her name, Lisa Blackidge, began to mean something new. Not scandal, not betrayal, but survival. As for Charles, his trial made headlines for weeks. Embezzlement, wire, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, attempted flight with forged documents. The maximum sentence was handed down without appeal, but that wasn't the best part. The best part was the moment the court awarded damages to Blackidge for reputation and financial losses. Half of Charles's seized assets were redistributed across the company, bonuses for every employee who stayed through the collapse, raises for the tech teams he once tried to defund, scholarships in William Blackidge's name to fund innovation for students from underrepresented communities. That was the kind of revenge that lasted, and then came the final blow. 1 week before sentencing, Charles's wife, who had filed for divorce the moment the indictment came through, released her own tell-all documentary. In it were texts, voicemails, footage, including a clip from Lisa's office the night I was fired. Charles, smiling behind, her whispering, "Let the dog go. He's too loyal to be useful." It aired on national television. That's when the world stopped doubting who the villain had been all along. 6 months later, Blackidge's stock tripled. Mars Tech requested a merger proposal. We declined. The media started calling us the company. That turned Betrayal into Blueprint. But I didn't care about headlines. What mattered to me was the rooftop. That's where I stood that night. 6 months since the day I was dismissed. Same skyline, same chill in the air. Lisa joined me there, quietly. No title, no bodyguards, just her. "They keep calling it your revenge arc," she said. I smirked. It was never revenge. No? It was correction. She looked out at the city. "So, what now?" "You build," I said. "With honesty. With people who've bled for it. With fire that doesn't burn everything around it." "And you?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. "I don't need to stand in the shadows anymore," I said. "I'm not anyone's bodyguard now." She nodded, then reached into her pocket and handed me something small. It was the locket she used to wear. Around her neck, her father's photo still inside. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For not destroying me when you could have." I closed my fingers around it. "I didn't need to destroy you," I replied. "You were already breaking." She didn't argue. We stood there for a long time. Two people who had built and burned and bled, but still stood, still breathing, still rebuilding. And in that moment, I knew. True revenge isn't rage. It's rising. Closure isn't forgetting. It's remembering with peace. And the most powerful comeback is standing tall. In the eye. Place where they once tried to bury you, that's not survival. That's dominance. That's legacy.